Welcome to Lesson 2, Lecture 3, where we talk about more realism and the way that states interact when we talk about realist views of state interactions. We've already touched a little bit about alliances and balancing in our previous lecture, so today I want to talk a little bit more formally about alliances. An alliance is a coalition of states that coordinate their actions to accomplish some end. Typically, alliances are military in nature, whether they're defensive or offensive, meaning that they gather together to defend themselves or to take territory. There's usually some sort of military goal in mind. The purpose of an alliance is to augment state power. For some small states, the alliances that it has, the partners that it has, may be the most important element of power that it has. New Zealand, for instance, having powerful friends such as Great Britain and the United States may be as important as any sort of military strength that they may possess. For realists, the idea of alliances is that they serve state interests and they're not permanent. So there is this quote that states don't have any permanent allies, just permanent interests, and that is a very realist statement. And so as the world changes, as the needs of the state change, the allies that states have and make will change with it. However, fluid alliances can also exacerbate the security dilemma, because if an alliance is so fluid that you can just change in and out of them, it's like having no alliance at all. And so this means that states then have to rely on themselves for their own safety and security, and that can lead to that kind of spiraling issue of the security dilemma that we showed in an earlier lecture. So NATO is probably the most well-known of today's military alliances. It has its origins in the post-Cold War, as the Soviet Union and the Allies were the two winners over Germany at the end of World War II. The Allies saw Russia's actions as being aggressive and were afraid that sooner or later the Soviet Union would attempt to militarily take more territory within Europe, and so they banded together. The Soviet response was to create the Warsaw Pact, which was essentially a mirror image of NATO and included the Soviet Union as well as the eastern satellite states such as Poland, East Germany, Hungary, the Czech Republic, etc., Czechoslovakia at the time. At the end of the Cold War, the Warsaw Pact disappeared. However, NATO continued, and without a clear threat from the Soviet Union, the idea now, or the question now, is what is its current role? Most recently, NATO was involved in the war in Libya, the civil war in Libya, where NATO supported the rebel forces and enforced a no-fly zone and bombed certain installations that belonged to the government forces of Gaddafi. And so, and NATO is also currently involved in the war in Afghanistan now to a lesser degree, but throughout the war in Afghanistan since 2001, NATO has been quite heavily involved. So other alliances for the U.S.-Japanese Security Treaty, where the U.S. has agreed to provide security for Japan, and if Japan is attacked to come in on the side of Japan. Other treaties with other countries such as the U.S. and Australia and the U.S. and South Korea are important. A non-U.S. alliance that is important is kind of the successor to the Warsaw Pact. It's the Commonwealth of Independent States, or CIS. Those are many of the states that were part of the Soviet Union. So Russia, Kazakhstan, Belarus, and the other stans, Tajikistan and Turkmenistan, that are part of the Commonwealth of Independent States. That's both a military and economic alliance. There are also a number of regional alignments, the Organization of American States, for example, or the Arab League. Well, what are some tools that states can use in realism? Bargaining. States can try to bargain for their position and try to get other states to do what they want them to do through deal making, and this bargaining often takes place through the use of statecraft in classical realism, which deals more with not just power but the way that power is used. Statecraft is an important tool that states have. There's also compellence, so powerful states can try to force other states to do what they normally wouldn't do, whether through threats or through actual action. Deterrence is getting states to stop what they may want to do or what they may be doing. This is what we're trying to do with Iran, trying to deter Iran from pursuing nuclear weapons. And so the ways that we're doing that, not only the U.S. but the world community, is through actions such as embargoes and trade restrictions, that sort of thing. Another tool that states have is to engage in an arms race, to either force other states to spend resources on arms or to become more powerful than the other states by obtaining their own arms. This is a potentially dangerous strategy because it could lead to more conflict, but it is a tool that states have to try to change the status quo, or to make sure that they maintain the status quo, and by status quo meaning the way that things are. When we talk about international relations, we typically talk about, or one way that we talk about them is by talking about rationality. Oftentimes in realism, especially neo-realism or structural realism, we talk about states as being rational actors, and what this means is that states are able to identify their own interests and to put priorities on those interests. Not only that, then states are able to perform kind of a cost-benefit analysis and calculate what course of action is going to be best. So it's kind of assuming a lot about a state, and assuming that a state is kind of a cold thinking machine, and that that's the way that states behave. And so one way that a number of international relations scholars talk about this rationality is by utilizing game theory, which comes from economics, and the most common perhaps game that is used or thought of is that of the prisoner's dilemma. This is one that you'll see on police shows all the time. Separate the two subjects and offer them a deal and hope that they both will turn on each other. Game theory games are simple. They have kind of a single solution, and they will show you what the best strategy is for all the actors involved, and their strategies will differ depending on the payoffs. And so essentially these game theory type of solutions are used to kind of evaluate potential problems and come up with a logical solution. And there's a great deal of game theory that is used in describing international relations. So that's just kind of a brief introduction. There's in your textbook there's a discussion of the prisoner's dilemma, and it looks like this, and there's an explanation for how that works, and so we will look at that within the textbook and briefly talk about it in coming lectures. The authors do not focus too much on actual game theory solutions, and I myself am not a game theorist, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time with this, but it is something that's important for you to kind of know and understand if you're thinking of studying international relations further, that it is a tool that is used, and it's a good one. It's just one among many tools that are used to try to understand why states behave the way they do. So let's finish there, and good luck.